What I actually believe is everybody's creative. I think there's this misconception of creativity equals being able to draw or paint, but that's such a myth.
My guest today is Jo Bird, one of my favorite people.
As a creative, never stop reaching for the stars because you just never know.
I love everything that she does.
Pushing yourself out of the comfort zone, that really can help your creativity.
You're a creative lead.
An idea costs nothing.
You've managed different big projects.
It's okay, I'll walk straight into it and figure it out after because I trust I can. I cannot expect anybody else to keep unlocking doors for me. I need to go out there and do that shit myself.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Unmatched. I'm super excited today to have a super creative conversation with Jo Bird, one of my favorite people on LinkedIn, someone that I've connected with recently, a bit closer, and that I'm following very, very closely as well. I love everything that she does, so I'm excited about sharing everything that she knows with all of you. Jo, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and also a super fan of yours too, Oana. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very sweet. I mean, I'll be honest, you're one of my favorite people on LinkedIn because, and not just on LinkedIn in general, because creativity is a topic that is very near and dear to me, very important, because as I look at the future of marketing, I think creativity is going to be finally, I think, at the center of it all. So I'm excited to chat with you about this. But before we go into all that, let's hear a little bit about who you are and what you do, and the most important question, why you do it.
Great question to get started. Let's go deep.
Yes.
So I'm Jo Bird. I'm an in-house creative lead at a brand called Lounge Underwear, formerly Gymshark. Prior to that, I did a whole mixture of things. The creative career journey is never straightforward. So I studied photography and then I ended up in telesales, which was my worst nightmare. I did family portrait studio with kids and dogs. They say never work with kids and animals, and it's totally true for me. So I ran a mile from that one. And then slowly but surely through my 20s, I worked my way up the career ladder, if we can say that for creativity, purely just by trying a lot of different things and moving on if the career didn't feel quite right for me. Until eventually I found this job at Gymshark, which funnily enough, when I applied, I didn't know the brand at all. But I've got a brother who's 7 years younger than me. And I sort of looked at him and I said, hey, this job spec sounds perfect for me. It's so exciting. It's doing in-house creative, art direction, photo shoots, but I don't know this brand. Do you know the brand? And he looked and he said, you need to get inside that building. So I was like, right, it's the cool
Smart
place.
guy.
Yeah, smart guy. It's the cool place to work. So I applied and the rest is history. I think ever since that job and that sort of first idea of doing creativity full time in the way that I'd always envisioned it, I've just thrived. And it's so true. Like, your calling is out there. You just got to hunt it down. So I was relentless. I was never going to stop until it felt right. And then it did.
That's really cool. That's a great first nugget to keep in mind, that, you need to find your purpose, and maybe it takes a little bit of time, but then eventually you find it. And when you do, you really need to really embrace it, right? And just make it your own. So that's very interesting. How did you become a creative? What sort of skill, passion in your childhood maybe led you to become a creative, and how hard was it? Because I'm guessing, to get to where you are today, it must have been quite a journey. So I'm interested to hear about that journey of becoming a creative and what effort it took to get there.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny now because I get a lot of people contact me saying like, Jo, you're doing so well. It's amazing. Like, good for you. And I'm like, guys, this was always going to happen for me because I was never going to stop. Whether I was 33 or 53, I was going to win awards. Okay. I was never going to stop. It's in my family. I have a creative family. My granddad was a magician. So growing up on a weekend, we'd go around to my grandparents. There would be a new magic trick to explore. Like, it was all about Disney. It was all about make-believe. My dad is very, very creative. So he's one of my early childhood memories is he's a massive football fan, Wolverhampton Wanderers football fan. And when we were little kids, they didn't have the money. He couldn't buy a season ticket to the games because he just did not have the money. So his outside the box thinking was to apply to be Wolfie, the fluffy football mascot. Because if you're a football mascot, you get all the games, you get to go to every single home and away game, you get your tickets not just paid for, you get paid to be there.
I
And
love that.
you get,
That's really thinking out of the
right?
box. I love that.
That's
That's creative thinking. All right.
right.
Yeah.
So it's this
Yes.
idea of thinking laterally, not literally, which my family, particularly my dad and my granddad, were just so good at. And so being around that 24/7, like having somebody there saying to you, oh, it's cool you've done that, but have you thought of this? That sort of gets ingrained in you. We were never allowed to be bored as children. If we, when you're a kid and you're like, Mom, I'm bored. Oh no. Like it'd be like, you're not bored. Like you could write a project about this, write a story about this, like take some photos, do this, do that. Like never allowed to be bored. So I think that is just that idea of nature versus nurture with creativity. For me, it was fully from the family. And then I just honed that skill as I kept getting older. So I have a lot to thank my family for in that respect.
So what's your theory? Can you become creative or are you born creative?
I fully believe that you can become creative. In fact, what I actually believe is everybody's creative. I think there's this misconception of creativity equals being able to draw or paint or write a song. That's such a myth. Creativity is essentially, having an idea, having a new idea, thinking outside the box. I was having a chat with a scientist yesterday. That sounds so random, but I was having a chat with a scientist. And the way we talked through each of our professions, which are deemed to be very polar opposite, the more alignments we found. Like a scientist will have a hypothesis and then they go and iterate until they can analyze the hypothesis. A creative will have a brief and then they go and iterate an idea until they come up with a solution to the brief. There were so many similarities. So what I'm trying to say is everybody from a scientist to a business person to an accountant to a creative is creative. It's just how you hone that idea process and how you can start to think outside the box in a way that works for you.
And why do you think that so few people choose that path of creativity? I feel I completely agree, by the way. I like you think everyone is creative. And by the way, my personal story is that I didn't find my creativity until I was in my 30s. And it's really funny because I've always seen myself as a very analytical, very organized type of person. And that was the story that I was telling myself. And that was how I grew up because my environment was very much like that. And not creative at all. So I sort of thought, okay, like that's not my thing. Creativity is not my thing. And it was not until very late in the game, after working a few jobs in different companies, that I landed on on a master's degree that opened me up to creativity in a way that I never thought about before, about myself, especially. And then from there, it all started to escalate. And I would have never probably thought that I would have been a head of marketing as I am today. When I started my career, I was thinking more it was like a business analyst, something that has to do with like the business side of things. And it was a lot of my journey that took me through that until I landed on the thing that actually makes me thrive is the creativity behind branding and making brands big and finding out what makes brands different. And I think there's a creativity there that I love to explore. So I'm just interested in your point of view of why do you think it takes so much pain and effort to get there for most people? That don't have maybe the type of your journey that you have, and you're not a designer or what we society think creative. You're a painter, a writer, or whatever. Why can't a finance person think themselves as creative?
I really think it's the story we're sold, from society and growing up, as you touched on. I think we're taught to compartmentalize. You've got the left side of the brain, the right side of the brain. The two cannot cross over. It doesn't make sense. Of course they can. Like there's nuances of everything. I mean, I'm a self-proclaimed creative person, but I'm also quite a logical creative person. So I look a lot at strategy for creative and things like that. I absolutely love that conversation and creativity. Like, why does this make sense for the brand, and sort of honing it in that way? Whereas I've worked alongside other creatives that are just the wacky and wild creatives that just come up with the craziest ideas. I'm like, how did your brain get there? I mean, there's a spectrum in creativity from right there where you've got the more rational people doing strategy work right through to the, painters that are coming up with the next sort of work of art that we'll see in a gallery. It cannot be compartmentalized like we've been taught. It cannot be separated like this. And it shouldn't be, because all of us have different life experiences. We pick up nuances from all different places and experiences. And that's what creativity is. It's what we've experienced in life and how we bring that to bring an idea to fruition. So I think if there was a bit more education around creativity and what creativity actually means and how you can work through becoming more creative or honing your creativity, I think people would thrive a lot more in the subject. I honestly just think in this moment in time, and definitely previously, it's the unknown. It's the crazy people in the corner that don't know what to do with their lives, that are just painting through their depression sort of stereotype. I mean, it's so old school now. I actually think social media, we can thank for a lot of things in creativity's respect, because it created the creator economy, which is now worth £250 billion, dollars rather. And that just proves that anyone can be creative. Anyone with a mobile phone who's got time to upload content can be creative. So I think our eyes are opening slowly. I think it's happening.
I think so too. I think more and more people are starting to see the benefit of creativity overall. And especially as we look into the future, my theory is that, creativity, empathy will have to lead in a world where technology is going to take over a lot of what we manually have to do today. So I'm wondering, what do you think about, how we can, extend that creativity beyond what it is today? How can we improve it? How can we become more innovative in that context of technology coming on and taking over a lot of the things that we can do today ourselves?
Yeah, that's such a good conversation. I mean, especially with AI and the way that that's really starting to move into the mass market now. I think if AI is teaching us anything, and sort of these modern pieces of tech that we're utilizing as creatives, it's to play to our strengths. There's been a lot of fear and scaremongering with new technology, like it's gonna take jobs, it's gonna reduce creativity. In some respects it will, but only if we don't navigate where our best use is. And as human beings, our best use is through connection, human connection, having conversations, having real experiences and taking ideas from those experiences. We're not needing to carbon copy what technology does. We're needing to work alongside it in a very reciprocal way. So I think there's the people that are going to thrive with new technology and the brands that are going to thrive with it are the ones that learn how to use it and to use it to their advantage in a very good way, and not sort of get scared by it or jump the gun with it too much. I mean, there's been brands that have been burnt already with AI and things like that because they've not really understood it before they've dived right in. There's a whole education piece here in the idea of going back to that childlike state of mind where you're discovering things for the first time and being okay with not being good at it. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people want the answer now. They want all the success now. But you can't do that with creativity. You really need to take a step back and learn things all over again. So yeah, I'd absolutely say play to our strengths, learn what we're good at as human beings and really hold on to that and then dial that up.
Comfort zone is something that I'm not very comfortable with.
Right.
And the one thing that I often wonder is a lot of people seem to thrive in a comfort zone. And I'm not trying to throw shade at anyone. I'm very respectful of everyone's opinion on this. For me, I feel that creativity cannot thrive in comfort zone, right? In a comfort zone. So the question is, how do you break that barrier? How do you challenge yourself constantly? How do you stay creative? Because one thing is, okay, we can become creative, but then how do you challenge yourself every day to stay creative? And what does actually staying creative mean nowadays? Like, do you take courses about creativity? Do you meditate? Do you, I don't know, are there tips and tricks to do that?
Yeah. I mean, you're so right. Like, human beings, we actually love routine. which is very counterproductive to creative careers and creative
Exactly.
It's conflicting. There's a lot of conflicts in creativity, but that is one of them. We like a routine. We like to do sort of the same things each day, and that's how we really thrive. But creativity does need newness. I've got a phrase, you are what you eat. So whatever I consume as a creative, if that's Love Island every night, which guilty, that is kind of me. But if that's Love Island or reality TV 24/7 and I'm just obsessed with it, and social media, my ideas that I come up with as a creative will be reminiscent of that culture, which is fine if you work for certain brands, but also you need to introduce newness. So if you have a plethora of media that you're consuming, whether you're going out for a walk and seeing billboards, or if you're listening to a podcast about science, or if you're having conversations with different industry professionals or reading a different book, you're consuming new things, and these singular ideas will start to collide to create new ideas. So, I mean, a lot of people will take references from things they've seen before and emulate them to create newness. That's what famous artists used to do. I think, was it Picasso or someone that said you still like an artist? I think the problem is now people are starting to carbon copy things they've seen rather than take the reference, match it with something new and create newness. So the only way you can do that is by consuming a lot of different things and just having all these different things floating around your brain. So comfort zone is good for routine and productivity, but pushing yourself out of the comfort zone, even in small ways, which is sit in a new environment, speak to someone new, read a new book, that really can help your creativity as well. It doesn't need to be big and scary at all.
I completely agree. And I love what you said earlier about, your conversation with the scientist the other day, because I also think that sometimes we're a bit guilty of trying to connect with people from our own circles, right? Again, it leads a little bit to the comfort zone. We're comfortable speaking to people that think like us, do the same things like we do, and or feel like us, right? Or are from the same background. And more often than not, I would say my own experience is you learn more by speaking with people that you have nothing to do with typically, and they are maybe from different industries or different parts of the world with different backgrounds. And from those exchanges, there's a certain growth and there's a certain understanding far beyond what you know and what you're used to. What's your experience there?
100%. When people say they love to travel, it's because you're going into like a new culture where people do things differently to you. And like the novelty there is fascinating. It's like, oh, they shop in this way and they hang out in this way, or, they display work in this way. All these different things that you open your eyes to are just like food for the soul. And so that's the same with me in this conversation with the scientist. It was like feeding my soul in a different way, because it was like, oh, wow, you do things that way? Oh, I can see similarities, but in a different way. And that's the stimulus a creative person needs. It's all about how to stimulate your brain and sort of make the sparks connect. And you can't do that with the same. So I actively encourage people to jump into something that feels like it could be totally opposite to what you might enjoy, but actually I guarantee you'll probably find some similarities. So yeah, we need to be less of like the herd animals and be more willing to sort of mingle and mix with new people and new ideas and new things. And I think that's how real originality can be found.
There's a saying that I absolutely love, which says something like, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love that. And it scares the shit out of me sometimes because I constantly feel like I need to learn and know more and more and more, because I feel like I never not know enough. Because what you don't know, you don't know. And if you think about it, is you are the mix of things that you already know, but there's so much more out there that you don't know. And that could completely change the way that you look at something just because you don't have that piece of information. And how interesting it is that you can, sit down with someone, they share a different perspective, and you have this huge aha moment that I've had so many times, where I thought, I was thinking in a certain direction, and all of a sudden someone was telling me their point of view. I was like, oh, I never thought about it this way. And now that you're saying it, like it's a completely different perspective.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I think this mindset is what separates the good from the great in creativity, because The good will be okay with doing things the way they've always done it. But the great are the ones that are so inquisitive that even when they've sort of nailed one level of success, they're like, no, but there must be something else. They're always plucking. They're never the finished article. And it's those kinds of people that I want to be around, the ones that are constantly hungry to find out more, because there's no way in this world you can possibly know everything. So I agree with you. I want to know more, even if that's intimidating, because it's like, where do you draw the line? But I would be bored if I had known everything. Like, what do you do with that then? Like, you need to sort of feed yourself, as I keep saying, like feed your mind and feed your creativity. And I think that's truly important, not actually just for creatives, but for human beings and growth as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, switching gears a little bit towards, staying in the field of creativity that we both love, but you also mentioned that you're a very logical person, and we both work in different brands, different fields. But we deal with creativity in different ways, right? And there's challenges that come from being creative in a world that is not just all about creativity, because creativity is one component, but then there's other components that are more numbers driven, that are more focused on insights, that might be counterintuitive to someone who is creative. So I'm curious to know, from your experience, you're a creative lead, you've managed different projects throughout your career so far in different companies, big ones as well. So I'm curious, how do you deal with that tension that comes from working on the creative side, but having to deal with the reality, the landscape of the market, the finance of it all, the things that might sort of limit the creativity, apparently, towards what you have to do or deliver.
There's a joke with whoever I work with. I'm the budget burner. So when there's a budget, they're like, oh, Joe's spending money again. Because I just get so excited. I'm like, we should do that. And then someone somewhere, usually the person holding the purse strings, has to rein me back in and put me back down to earth. My point with that is, if I don't do the blue sky thinking, no one will. Like, somebody somewhere has to reach for the stars, and then we can lasso it and pull it back down to earth. And that's fine. I'm fine with that, as long as we even attempted to reach up there. Because 1 in 100, it's going to work out. I'm okay with that, 1 in 100. I think where the problem lies is if people start to feel like they can't reach for the stars. Because let's be honest, some of the greatest creativity you've ever seen, you'd look at and go, how did they get that through the boardroom? How did they pitch that one? Like that, I would love to be a fly on the wall in there. Somebody was in that room reaching for the stars, and they were not put off by it. So perhaps it's my resilience. Perhaps it's the fact, like I say, I've been brought up with a magician in the family and I'm just cooey-eyed for magic. But there's something about my character that allows me to keep reaching and present those ideas and not get laughed out the room. And I think it's because I do have that emotional awareness to sort of speak the language of the people I'm pitching to, even if I just make light of it and say, oh, it's okay, I'm spending the money again, but we could work that out afterwards, and make a joke of it to show them I relate to them, but I'm still going to punch high. So I think it's understanding who you're pitching to, who's in the room, who and what do they need to know, and what are their business problems, and just acknowledging that you're aware of that. Secondly, as a creative, never stop reaching for the stars, because you just never know. And thirdly, I'm a high communicator. So even if we get a little bit far down the line and the chief marketing officer wants to have a word because XYZ isn't working out, I'm the sort of person that will be like, tell me why from your point of view. Just let me sit and listen for 10 minutes. Talk at me. Because if I can get in their world, I can go and problem solve that with my creative brain. They don't need to necessarily have the answers. I just need the transparency, and then I can go and work that out. Unfortunately, though, a lot of creatives do more talking than they do listening. So they don't give people the opportunity to actually put their case forward. Or a lot of people in other roles think they have to solve the problem as well as give the problem. If we do the 50-50 thing, and like I say, play to our strengths, we can make it work. So yeah, I think keep reaching for the stars, know who's in the room you're pitching to, and be a high communicator and learn to listen. And I think with that in mind, you could probably meet halfway. And I think that's fair game. Otherwise, if creatives had all the money, we'd have slides in the office, spend it all on pizza, and there wouldn't be budget for anything. So
Cool offices and all the perks. No, I mean, I totally see your point, and I think you've made some really good points there about communicating, but also listening and aiming for the sky, because you do need to aim high. You know how they say, like, aim for the moon and then land, somewhere closer to Earth, because otherwise, if you aim too low, then you're not ever in a position where you can reach those goals, right? The other perspective for me, which is interesting, we have such different perspective. My perspective on creativity, having a background in Eastern Europe, and this is where I was born, is achieve the best that you can with what you have.
right.
And I feel like for me, it's been the other way around. It's like, it's a pattern that wherever I've been in situations and positions where I've had to just make magic with almost nothing. And to me, that's such a challenge, and I love it. At one point I was saying, like, give me zero budget and I'll give you something. But if you let me, like, don't limit the creativity. If you still limit the budget, which I know it's very idealistic, you can't always deliver on no budget, right? We know that. But there's such a challenge there in for me personally, in figuring things out in a way, thinking laterally, vertically, however you want, and just figuring out what you can use, what you have at your disposal that nobody's looking at, nobody's using, but you can still use it and make something great out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally get that. And there'll probably be a lot of people listening to this that are maybe very small businesses or entrepreneurs that are trying to get started out of absolutely nothing. And that goes back to that hustle culture mindset of being able to turn air into money, basically. And I see great value in that. Don't get me wrong, early in my career, I was creating work out of nothing. I didn't work at your gym sharks that had, big budgets for things. An idea costs nothing. It costs absolutely nothing to have an idea. I can sit here in my own world, consuming whatever around me, and come up with a great idea. That doesn't cost anything. It's generally the execution of the idea that starts to top up the money. So at that part, we can still create ideas for no money, and then we can work with the resources we've got to bring it to life. It might shape shift the concept slightly, but it could be that maybe we're doing a marketing campaign where we had this whole idea about, I don't know, telling the story of a woman. And my concept was, but I want to do it in a magazine, and I want to print a big print magazine and distribute it around the world. Well, hold on, is the magazine the idea, or is it the story of the woman that's an idea? Because if it's the story of the woman, maybe it's just a virtual podcast that we do, that we invite people to come on to, and we don't actually need to spend any money on it. Or, something else from a digital point of view. Maybe I can just film something on my phone where I narrate a story or a poem, or, Or if we've got mega bucks to spend, we could do a big TV ad and get celebrities in. As long as the core idea is there, story of a woman, it doesn't matter how you execute. It just matters what you're trying to say. There's a great quote I heard. I went to Cannes Festival last year, and I think it was the creatives behind some of the Heineken ads said it. They said, once you have your literal idea, then you can go lateral. So unless you've got that literal message you're trying to say in one sentence and you've nailed it, then you can start thinking outside the box and going crazy. But if you don't have that core literal idea in the first place, you shouldn't be playing, silly games with ideas. So maybe that leans into that a little bit. An idea costs nothing.
Completely. And I love that. And I so agree with it, because it's all about what you're trying to say. It's not, because I think the mistakes some people make is that they're going straight to the execution.
Yes.
Right? So they don't spend time thinking, okay, what are we trying to say, and to whom and why, right? That's the first starting point. And then you come up with this idea, which is the baseline, as you say, is the story of a woman. That is the thing that we're trying to communicate. How you then execute that is beside the point. That you can be, you might use budget, or you might not use any budget. You might use different media or different tools or models or no models, or in our case, we've done a campaign with our own employees, to save costs, and it turned out amazing because the story was there from the beginning, and we wanted to tell people's stories beyond the actual product. So that just goes to show that you can use whatever you have at your disposal as long as you know what you're trying to communicate. So I think that's a fantastic point. How do you see that process though? Happening in real life? How easy is it? Have you experienced challenges in that process? Because for me, I think that's the most difficult part of the whole creative process, that I've personally encountered. That it's almost like people jumping over to execution before they start thinking about the concept itself.
Oh, yeah. And I hear you on this one. I have a lot of empathy. I've been through it a lot. I think it's because a lot of maybe because we work in-house, client side, it's all about the performance marketing, or for the most part, investing budget into, creative concepts. They want to see a return on investment. And I totally understand that. So a lot of the time, sort of either the marketing team, or I say a lot of marketing teams are very creative. So it's mostly sort of the finance teams or whoever's got the budget are saying like, but how is this going to shift product? It's problematic in a sense because it really depends what your campaign brief is. And that's why having a brief is so, so very important, because unless you've got that universal document that outlines why you're even doing this campaign in the first place, it's always going to be a tit for tat, or it's very subjective, my opinion versus your opinion. If you've got that universal document that maps out, like, why are we even going to do this campaign? Is it for brand awareness? Therefore, we can tell a story about the story of a woman. Or is it actually to shift this new product? Then we're going to skip straight through to just take photos of the product and put it on paid social, which is proven to work because I've seen those campaigns get return like that. I would argue you need a really good balance of the two. You need the storytelling legacy pieces. You also need those quick win performance marketing for your cash flow for the business. If we can get to that agreement in a room, in the C-suite or the leadership team, and we can agree that we need both of these, then I think we can work through this idea of having a concept. But if we can't see eye to eye on that, then I think that's where the problems start to sink in and people sidestep concept completely. So I think, again, it goes back to communicating and just understanding the brief, the campaign, what everybody needs from their side, and then coming to those compromises. And just erasing a bit of the subjectivity, I think.
Right. Yeah, I can totally see that point. And also, I guess it also depends on the type of brand that you work for. You might be a newly formed brand that, doesn't have that much to hang on to when it comes to the legacy part that you mentioned, which is super important for bigger brands, like, for example, the one that I'm working for. So it's really different from brand, to your point. But I also think that the conversation needs to always happen, because beyond the legacy, there's always modern day stories, and people buy from people, and people buy with an emotional attachment to their purchase decisions, most of the times, for the most
Absolutely.
part. So except for, like if you're buying on Amazon something very basic, or if you go into the groceries, everything else, that we that are kind of objects that are part of our lifestyle are based on that emotional decision. So there must be something there that, the creativity can sort of link to. But the other question that sort of comes from this piece is authenticity. And I know this is such a buzzword, and I know that everyone is talking about being authentic, and this is such a must. But to me, at one point, the question that is being raised is, what does even authentic mean nowadays when things are changing so quickly? Can you be authentic today in the same way that you're saying A, B, or C, and then tomorrow, because things have shifted, you're saying X, Y, and Z? And are you still being authentic? And where does authenticity fall into in this whole creative process for brands?
Yeah, it's a big question now, especially because I don't know if you've seen, but more and more of these like real or fake social videos are coming out where CGI is sort of embedded into reality. There's so many of those I've seen where I'm like, oh, that wasn't real. Like I thought that was it's CGI. Oh my gosh, So more and more as we go through time and technology advances, the line of reality and fake is going to start to blur. And then that is really going to put a pressure on brands to stay true to their authentic voice and their values and what they believe. And I think that's the answer to your question, in a sense of, what are your brand values? Like, why did you start this brand? I mean, let's sideline those businesses that are just on Amazon trying to turn over cash, because they aren't trying to build a brand. So this is not relevant to them. But for brands that are trying to build a community and trying to build a brand awareness and brand presence and go for years and years and years and build that legacy we talk about, they are going to need to solidify some brand values. Like, what's your mission? Who are you trying to help? Like, what sub-communities and subcultures are you really deep diving into? There's an amazing book by Bobby Hundreds. It's called This Is Not a T-Shirt. He's the co-founder and chief creative officer of The Hundreds. I think Complex named them one of the fifth best streetwear brand in the world or something like that. Their mantra is people over product. And they started when Bobby Hundreds was a skater and he was trying to create T-shirts for skaters. So he knew that community. He knew who was a skater in his community. He knew who to sell to. He knew what T-shirts they wanted. He was in it. And then he started writing blog posts about his life as a skater and the T-shirts that started getting a lot of traction. And then they found out Pharrell Williams was reading the blog posts. And then they're like, oh, hold on a minute, we're big time now. They did that authentically because they were one of them. And I think that's how a brand becomes so authentic, because it's genuinely true. The same story, Ben Francis and Gymshark. He was a lifter. He went to the gym. Those were his friends. Those were his people. That was his community. He just noticed there was a lack of stringer tees or product. And this is what I'm going to create then, because I know my community need it. I'm not saying you can't start a business if you're not exactly that person. But if you're going to go ahead and do that, get to know that person, like hang out with them, figure out what they need, what's their problem and what their values are, and then speak to that. You can be authentic by just being authentic. You don't need to create authenticity, you know?
I love that you mentioned those examples, because I was going to get to that, and this is the perfect segue. In reality, you are touching on personal brands as well, and how those values are now linked in the modern times with the audience. So what I notice is there's now a shift in between traditional brands and the brands that are led by personal brands. And let's just look at Kim Kardashian. And, you might think whatever about her, but she has managed to build a personal brand at a very high level, and an empire, a business empire around that, and product empire. So you can see how people behind brands start to become much more important and much more relevant than the traditional brands, just for the fact that traditional brands don't have anymore the face that can speak to those values. So then, the people that are still with those brands, with those traditional brands, have the, the opportunity, but also the big task of maintaining those values intact, and though bringing them to the modern day consumer in a way that feels authentic. So I'm kind of wondering, in your perspective, what is the big challenge that, traditional brands need to sort of deal with in this new landscape of a lot of brands that appear now on the scene are actually based on real people with real values, connecting with their audience in a much different way, much more authentic way. And how do we still keep that authenticity alive, from that perspective of legacy?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of traditional brands are probably getting very nervous now, because you do have all these new brands that are coming onto the scene with personal brand CEOs, people like Kim, or with Tala, it's Grace Beverly, who's doing really, really well, like Ben Francis for Gymshark, things like that. And young people are aspiring to those people. So therefore, they're buying into their brand because they're aspiring to it. They're like, wow, this young woman's an entrepreneur. Like, if I shop Tala, maybe one day I could be like her. And they just want to absorb that content. Same with Ben and whatever else. That's not to say you can't have a brand if you don't want to put yourself as the CEO in the limelight. That's completely understandable. And a lot of people won't want to do that. But if you've got a business of that size, you certainly have a lot of people working for you that would be okay with being in the limelight and could speak to your product and your business in a very good way. So typically we've seen a lot of organizations hide their staff and employees where it's like, we're going to control, you just got to work for us. We're insecure. We don't want you talking about us. We're going to control absolutely everything. I don't think that's a smart way to go. I think given the employees a bit of training about how to talk outwardly about the brand, and especially people that have been in the brand for a long time and whatnot, have proven themselves, I think it's incredible PR to have your team members talk about your brand. I mean, it's just a spider web of networking that is possible there that one person leading a brand could not do on their own, and one logo could not do on their own either. So I think personal branding, defacing a logo, getting the people behind the brand to the forefront is absolutely the way to go. Humans want human connection and they want human aspiration as well. But it does not just have to be the CEO who's trying to do that. It could be one of many people that work for the brand that is up for doing it, could speak openly about the values and things like that. So that's what I would vouch for.
I 100% agree. And I would say more than one person. It should be, a big group of people that in the end, what is interesting today is that everyone is a micro influencer.
Right.
We're all on social media in different ways, right? We're not doing it, necessarily professionally, but we're doing it.
Yep.
We are on social media and we show and we share things. Some people are more personal and sharing more family pictures and holidays pics and so on. Other people are more professional and are showing the work that they're doing, but everyone is on social media. So it's an interesting point that you're bringing, that not more is being done by brands on this front, but I think things are starting to move more and more, and there's a certain push into that direction. But recognizing that your employees are people that have a network, and some of them very big networks on different social media platforms, it's a huge advantage, and actually it comes for free right now. I have to wonder if this is always going to be like this, I have to say. Maybe things will change in the future, but for now, it's absolutely free marketing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think businesses would be silly to miss a trick. In fact, I get asked a few times by people, if I do podcasts and things like that, they say, "Oh, don't Lounge mind that you keep speaking outwardly on your own time?" I'm like, why would they mind? They've done a character judgment on me. They know that I'm conscientious, I'm a hard worker, they employed me for a reason. Why would they mind if I'm promoting the brand in the best way possible? I mean, I've been to international events and people will say, "Hey, nice to meet you. Where do you work?" And I'll go, "I work at Lounge, blah, blah, blah." And I talk all about it. That's free marketing, to potentially really important industry contacts. So I think it's of utmost importance to empower your employees to do the personal branding activity for you and with you. Obviously, to an extent, control what's being said and how it's being said, because it's your brand that's at stake. It all needs to be aligned. But I think by empowering people to do that conversation is not just empowering for the brand, but empowering for the employee, who perhaps day to day needs to feel that sense of self-worth that they can't just get from their routine job. Maybe they do need to spread the nest outside of work and sort of speak to people and meet new people and things like that. And genuinely, it'll come full circle, because everything I do outside of work comes full circle and improves me in work. 100%, no doubt about it.
I cannot agree more. I mean, from my personal experience of doing this podcast and being more active on social media recently, especially on LinkedIn, but also on Instagram and on Twitter, I have learned so much in the last 2 years that I can honestly say I was a little bit blind to some realities out there previously to this, just because I wasn't practicing the craft, right? This is how I call it, being a practitioner of your craft, in this case, marketing and brand, means you need to actually do it yourself to figure out how hard it is to actually build an audience. And then there's going to be a few buttons here and there that are going to click in your mind and have some real aha moments that will make you shift your thinking in different ways. And this is also linked to what we discussed before about creativity. So I can completely agree with what you're saying. There's so much that I'm learning from this that I am infusing into my job, and it's coming so full circle in so many ways, from people that I'm meeting, that I'm connecting to projects and things that I need to do at work, to topics that I'm learning about and skills that I'm acquiring, that I don't think you're able to tap into all those things by just doing the routine work that you're doing. Even with all the leadership trainings and things that, the companies are so good at, offering us. But in my opinion, I think it just starts within. So I'm curious about, how did it start for you, this personal journey of being much more open, much more present and visible online, and sharing all these thoughts with the world? Was it daunting at the beginning? Was it something that you thought you absolutely need to do? How did it all start?
Yeah, for me, I didn't quite know what I was getting myself into. Like, there wasn't this master plan. Like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a personal brand, post on LinkedIn 5 days a week. Like that. That would have terrified me. I probably would not have done it. For me, it was in context to the role that I had at the time. I'd been working at Gymshark for almost 4 years. I'd been doing evenings, weekends. I put my heart and soul into that job because I absolutely loved it. And I watched the people around me do the same thing. And then, through no fault of anyone's, the business had a change in direction and there was a lot of redundancies made. And I wasn't affected, but I watched a lot of people who had worked tirelessly for the brand get made redundant. People even in the C-suite were made redundant. And then I had that penny drop moment of like, this is business, like this happens. And when a business has got to do what it's got to do, they're not going to think twice about me personally because they physically can't. So if I'm not investing into myself, what I'm investing into this business, I don't think that's a smart move. I don't know why I'd never looked at it before. It seems so obvious when I realized that. Like, why wouldn't I do that? I thought that just doing the business work was investing in myself, but it's actually not the full picture. So then I started to think, do you know what? I'll just post a bit of my work online because it's in my portfolio that I would send to a job interview, but no one else is really going to see it. So I'll just post it on LinkedIn, like new work, and I'll credit the team. And then that turned into me writing sort of posts about like how I felt about project. And then people started responding saying, oh, Joe, you're really inspiring. Like, thanks for posting that. And then I just thought, hold on a minute. I'm not the only one that needs this encouragement. I'm not the only one that needs this advice. Like, there's people out there that are on the same trajectory as me that kind of need the support. What if I could give it to them? And I played into that a little bit, and it was so authentic to me, but it was helping so many people. I just realized the penny drop of, I can actually help people at the same time as sort of building my personal brand. And that's a very fulfilling position to be in, because when you've done so many campaigns as part of your creative job, they start to not mean that much anymore. But when you can actually impact somebody else's career in a positive way, game changing. Like, that is literally like a feeling that you just can't get through your day-to-day job. And now I mentor people, I coach people, I get so much gratification from it. I hook people up with new connections, like you say. Like, if I get a photographer message me and they're like, I'm trying to get into this, do you know anyone? I'm like, yeah, I know someone, let me connect you. It's a whole different kind of experience. And as a byproduct, my profile is building. It wasn't the intention, it just happens. So I think it took for something to happen to me personally for me to have the wake-up call. And then as a byproduct, I just started churning out content, and then that started helping other people. So it's a very healthy knock-on effect, actually. And I feel really fulfilled by it. I feel really fulfilled.
I can totally see that from everything that you write
Yeah.
online, obviously, but also I would imagine that it's really empowering to have the feeling that you are where you choose to be, not where you have to be. And I think this is where, for me, the perception a little bit changed a couple of years ago when my own journey with writing online started, because just as for context, I've always been, to be honest, I've always been on LinkedIn, and I've always been, even writing here and there, I've always been active since 2014, I would say, or 13. But it was very much more in the background. I'm very good at networking, always. And so I was very good at reaching out to people's DMs and talking to them and getting to know them. And I have some really cool stories about meeting some really interesting people, throughout the years by just doing that. And it builds such a network and such a community around you that it's so empowering. But the next level is as you say, when you start sharing visibly with others and others start interacting, that feeling of community, that you're never alone, that your network goes beyond the 10 people that you see every day,
Right.
is so fulfilling, and it's such a powerful feeling.
It's really powerful, and it gives you so much self-worth. Like, I've spent my career asking for permission, like, please can I have this job? Please can I have a promotion? Please recognize me? Like, please pay me more? You know, all these questions you ask when you're in your 20s and you're trying to climb the ladder. There comes a point, I don't know if it's when you hit your 30s, that you're like, screw that, but...
Or your 40s, like in my case, I don't know. I think it depends on the generation.
It really, really does.
The younger you get, the earlier you get the point, I think.
It really does. Something happens at some point for you that you just think, I cannot expect anybody else to keep unlocking doors for me. I need to go out there and actually do that shit myself. And it feels like a daunting task, but actually when you get into it and you learn how to promote yourself and speak up in a healthy way, it's just personal PR. That's all it really is. You realize that you've been hiding for years and years and years, and you learn things about yourself that you would never have learned if you hadn't started doing this. And the way I write my posts genuinely is like I'm writing to myself 10 years ago. Like, what would little Joe want to have read or seen or learned? And that's how I stay really true to myself. I just think of what would I have needed. And then it's...
I love that. And that's the most
easy.
valuable part of it, right? To help and empower others. I love that you said personal PR. The way I refer to it is personal positioning. I think for me, personal branding is very daunting because it sounds so big and so like not my level almost. It's like, oh, am I trying to build a brand? Not really. But the way that it made me feel better about this whole thing, I mean, in the end, it's just terminology. But the way that I see that it's for me more approachable is personal positioning, because in the end, everyone has a positioning. It's really the perception and the reputation that you want others to see and get from you when you know, the typical quote is the thing that people remember when you leave the room. And it's a bit like the smell, right? The analogy that I love to make is like a smell. Is it a good smell when you leave the room, or is it a bad smell when you leave the room? And then that's not good, right?
Gotcha.
So it's not as daunting as it sounds. And it's funny story. The other day I was talking to someone that I really appreciate, a woman, and a very good professional, and she just recently got promoted. And it's a promotion that she had anticipated and asked for and pursued for quite some time. And now that she's got it, she was telling me like she feels so much better and so much calmer, but she didn't even post it anywhere and didn't make it official anywhere and didn't post it on LinkedIn. And she didn't want to, she almost like she wanted to hide it. And that's the point that you were mentioning before. It's almost like you are hiding from something. How do you look at that accountability factor? Because to be honest, it's really not about the companies. It's not their responsibility entirely. Of course, there's a tiny bit of, you know, how good of a company you are and you can support others. I have, you know, people in my team that I support through different types of, you know, trainings that we have available. But in the end, for me, whether it's for myself or for my team, the message is always the same, is it starts within, it starts with you. It's you who need to take accountability towards how you want to develop yourself. There's no development plan outside of what you want your own development plan to be.
Yeah. It's not what people want to hear, is it? People want someone else to open the door for them. Like, I mean, I think to myself early in my career, if I said to my manager, we need better progression plans, and they were like, will you write your progression plan? It's like, no, that's your job. It's like, hold on a minute. That's a very junior mindset, isn't it? That's why I mentioned the age thing, because it's something, a penny just drops when you're mature. But accountability always starts with you. It's the idea of being causal or effect in NLP training, neuro-linguistic programming. It's the idea of, are you going to point your finger at someone else if something doesn't go your way, or are you going to point your finger at yourself? The minute you learn to point the finger at yourself is when the magic starts to happen, because you realize how in control of your life you actually can be and you haven't been. Right through to things like, I now curate who I spend time with. outside of work, in work. In your career, sometimes when there's like the bitchy, gossipy people and like you get sucked into that, it's like not anymore, because that has a direct influence on your mindset. There's all sorts of things like I don't drink that much. If there's a work do, you'll rarely find me drinking at the work do. That's a personal choice for me, but I know that that's going to make me more productive the next day if I don't. So many different things you can do to take accountability. It does not just have to be in terms of putting content on LinkedIn. It's a lifestyle choice. Like, how seriously are you actually taking this? Because the most successful people in the world are the ones that have taken it really seriously and have made this life shift to make sure they can be their best, to create their best work. So it's very easy to go, yeah, well, nobody helped me get there. It's like, did you help you get there, though? That's the question.
Yeah, and I love how you frame it, because this whole personal branding talk seems like it's a very tactical, almost like you're putting together a strategy and then you are coming up with the right content and the hooks and whatever. You learn how to write and then you're good to go. And in reality, it's really just not about that. That's why I hate a little bit the term personal branding, because I think it's so confusing to people. Because they immediately they go and think about the wrong things. In reality, when you look at your personal positioning, it's a much deeper exercise.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you're looking within and you're like, okay, I'm here. How do I want people to perceive me? And how do I want to live my life? How does my life need to look for me to thrive and to be fulfilled? Because I've reached a point where I understand now, and I completely resonate with everything that you said, that I'm not really getting frustrated about all those small things that I used to get frustrated in the past, that now I understand the bigger context of, because I have the experience and the maturity to understand. I'm not spending time gossiping here and there or whatever, that's all kind of in my 20s. Now it's all about lifestyle changes and decisions, right? And the effort that you want to put into everything that you're doing, from your job to your hobby to your family to your kids to how you live your life, overall, holistically. And that is actually your personal positioning.
Yes.
Right? It's
totally.
The rest is like blah, blah, blah. It's okay. How you execute certain things, little bits here and there. But the bigger picture is actually the main thing.
Yeah, totally. Well, if you want it to be authentic and for it to have legs to it and to last the test of time, it has to be it has to be from you. Like, it has to be a part of you, and you only get you if you look at your entire lifestyle. You can't segment my day job from your home life, because they have a direct impact on each other. And I've got friends who are the best creatives, like honestly, so skilled, so talented. They do not fully understand this concept of personal positioning, as you say, how to self-promote, how to network correctly, who to hang around with to get the best out of them. They haven't identified these things. And so they're struggling with their next move. They can't get a job. They've got the credentials, they've got the work, but they've just not figured out the rest of it. Actually, when you figure out the rest of it, the portfolio becomes almost secondary. Like, people almost don't care about your portfolio. It's crazy, some of the things I've been asked. I'm like, do you want to see my work? And they're like, oh yeah. Just like, really? I think it's the way you navigate your life and curate your life, is probably a better word, is very, very important to the way your career then moves. So if you haven't done that, then I think you're going to come unstuck at points. And same to what you say about people that just focus on personal branding. You see it all the time on LinkedIn, people that are trying to make a business out of personal branding and that are selling six-figure sums to CEOs and blah, 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 blah. You see straight through it. I can see straight through it. Like, it's completely inauthentic. I still don't know who you are behind that LinkedIn post. Whereas perhaps you and I connected because we could see the genuine person beneath the post, and we're like, yeah, I trust that person, and trust is everything. So I think if you can sort of figure that personal life situation, bring it through to your personal brand positioning or PR, I think you've got a much better chance of it doing what it needs to do for you.
So is it really an age thing, is the question that I'm asking myself. Because of course, I'm happy where I am today, but I wish that little Oana in her 20s would have figured some of these things out a bit, better, to make better use of the time, right? And so if little Joe and little Juana would listen to us chatting right now, what would you tell them to focus on?
The only thing I would say, because I rate my journey, even though it felt like it took a long time, it was painful at points. I've had many breakdowns, many tears, all that sort of stuff. It's given me the resilience I now needed to pursue what I'm pursuing. It's not for the faint-hearted. Creativity is not for the faint-hearted. What I would say, though, is to focus on what's important. Like, perhaps as a young woman, you get very bogged down with, am I good enough? Am I pretty enough? Am I smart enough? Am I skilled enough? Whereas actually, you don't need as many receipts as you think you do. I think women particularly are conditioned to come with multiple evidence that they can do this one specific task, whereas men are like, it's fine, I'll talk my way into it and figure it out later. I would just adopt that masculine energy a bit earlier on in my career if I could. That energy of, it's okay, I'll walk straight into it and figure it out after because I trust I can. That will get you there quicker. It's the idea of fake it till you make it, as long as you can back it up afterwards. And I have full faith in myself that I can back it up afterwards. So stop trying to collect 100 receipts just for one thing. Just have half a receipt and go head first and see what happens. And as long as you're not harming anyone or lying in the process, then you will find you'll do pretty well.
Oh, I love that. And girl, I have to say, I feel like we should have a glass of wine and talk some more about this because it's a whole thing, and I'm sure that we have some more stories there that we can share. What's your final thought on how to hone into that creativity from all those different aspects that we've spoken about, right? It's a complex world out there, and the world is changing every day. The way we were doing things, let's not even say 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, is fundamentally different of how we're doing things today and how we're going to do things in 1 year from now. And so there is this sense of resilience and adaptability, flexibility that we need to develop, everyone, but especially people that work in a creative field, to stay afloat and to sort of, stay on top of everything that is happening out there.
Yep.
How do we do it? How do we navigate this whole thing in a way that keeps us sane, keeps us creative, and keeps us delivering on the promise of that creativity to our businesses?
I would say stay curious, because curiosity is a very positive thing. It's not super scary. It's not super daunting. Stay curious, whether that is a conversation with someone, whether that is just going into the library and picking up a new book, whether that is just having a little play with an idea in your own time and just learning and failing and not telling anybody that you've done it. Stay curious, because there is nobody on this planet that knows what's ahead of us in the next 5 or 10 years' time. It is all moving very, very fast. Nobody's got the guarantee of how it's going to go. If you don't stay curious, though, you'll never know, and you won't be able to stay adaptable and agile and be able to pivot when you need to. So I think curiosity and exploration can be your best friend. And I want to be that kind of creative, the adventurer, like Dora the Explorer, who puts a red backpack on and is like, where are we going today? Because I just think that is the only way you can be a creative who stands the test of time. If you're a closed door, I think you're going to come unstuck and get very unhappy very quickly. So yeah, be a little bit more Dora the Explorer. That's my advice to people.
I love that, and I have the same objective. Curiosity is at the top of my priorities, and I have to say it's the one thing that will always keep you afloat. Because if anything else fails around you, curiosity will make you take the next step and the next step and the next step, and you will never stop until you reach the next milestone, because you will be still on that journey, as opposed to staying still and stuck and not finding the right door to go through at a certain point. So, Joe, thank you for this amazing conversation. I had so much fun. I learned so much from you, and I learn so much from you every day, from everything that you post, and keep doing that. I love how you're sharing and how authentic it is, and how much you're helping through your post. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing. Thank you.